A while back, I got fed up with the flimsy garden trellises I've purchased in years past, so I decided to make a couple heavy duty trellises. I wanted to do it as simply and inexpensively as possible, and I'm really happy with how they came out. I've used these mostly for cucumbers, but I'm expanding my operation a bit this year, and I wanted a couple more for peas and green beans. I started by getting a roll of galvanized steel garden fencing. I could have used chicken wire or something like that, but I wanted to make sure the gaps were big enough that cucumbers wouldn't get stuck in them as they grow. I also wanted something that was kind of heavy duty. The roll of fencing I went with is 3 feet wide, and my garden beds are 8 feet long, so I decided to make 2 trellises for each bed rather than trying to double up or otherwise have a seam in the fencing had I made one long trellis. In addition to the fencing, the only other materials I need are PVC pipe, corner connectors, and zip ties. Lots of zip ties. I made my trellises 6 feet tall, and they set into the garden beds and simply lean backwards against my privacy fence. There's a slightly different way I could have made these if I wanted them to be freestanding, and I'll talk about that a little more later in this video. The build is pretty straightforward. Make a rectangle out of PVC and zip tie fencing to it. For each trellis, I needed 2 6-foot lengths of pipe and 2 3-foot lengths. I don't bother gluing the joints together because this thing will never come apart once all the fencing is zip tied in place. After I have my rectangle, I pull a length of fencing over it and zip tie it at one end to hold it in place. Since this stuff is springy and comes in a roll, it wants to roll back up as soon as I let it go. So once it's secured at one end, I'll start zip tying it down both long sides of the rectangle. I only do a few zip ties at a time on each side to make sure it's even all the way down. But as long as you cut the shorter PVC pipes to 3 feet exactly, there won't be much wiggle room anyway. It's a hard project to screw up. Once I get down to the end nearest the roll of fencing, it should be pretty flattened out since it's held into place with so many zip ties. I'll cut the fencing with some heavy duty wire cutters and finish zip tying that end. Now I'll just trim off the excess bits of fencing that are poking out, and then I'll go around and clip the tail off each zip tie. And that's about it. After many years, it's possible that the zip ties will become brittle or worn out from sun damage, and I may need to start replacing them. But so far, I've used my first 2 trellises for 3 seasons now, and everything is in the same shape as when I built it. As I mentioned, I use these in my raised beds. I just set them in place and lean them back against the privacy fence. I'll secure them at the bottom with a few of these wire U-shaped ground anchors. They work really well, and you can get a large package of these online for pretty cheap. I don't bother securing them to the fence at the top, and I've never had any problems with that. Well, earlier I mentioned a way to make these freestanding. I'm sure there are a bunch of ways that this can be done, but the simplest way is to substitute 2 of the 90-degree elbow pieces with T-connectors. On the 2 corners that will be against the ground, use T-connectors instead of the elbows, and then pound some thin rebar into the ground where you want the trellis to sit. Make sure to use long rebar. I would pound at least 3 feet of rebar into the ground and have another 2 to 3 feet sticking out of the ground. Then you'll just slide the trellis over top of the rebar, making sure to guide the rebar into the bottoms of the T-connectors, and it will stand straight up. Make sure to buy rebar that is thin enough to fit into the T-connector opening, and of course this will depend on which diameter of PVC pipe you use. And now, just for good measure, I'll show building another one in ultra fast speed. That's it for now. If you liked the video, please subscribe to see more like this in the future. Thanks for watching, and until next time, this is Great Lakes Prepping.